sometimes when our data set has outliers, we want to create this modified box plot so that we can account for the fact that one or a few of our observations are outliers, and then we can focus on what the rest of the distribution looks like. So how do we determine if something is an outlier? Well, we use this rule called the 1.5 IQR rule. You calculate the interquartile range IQR. You multiply that by 1.5. So you're basically giving yourself this fence where you can take the upper quartile and you can add 1.5 of your interquartile range. That gives you the buffer of values that would be considered close enough to the regular distribution to not be considered outliers. Then down at the lower quartile, you do that same 1.5 IQR value, but you subtract it from that lower quartile. And so you're creating an upper and a lower fence. Any value that's within that is considered a normal value, and any value outside of that is going to be considered an outlier. So to make a modified box plot, you still start by getting the 5-number summary. You draw your axis, you get an appropriate scale. You will draw your box from your lower quartile to your upper quartile, and you'll go ahead and draw in the median. But before you draw the whiskers, you have to determine if there are any outliers in the data set. So calculate what those fence values would be and look to see if any of the data set values you have are beyond those fences. If you have an outlier, you're going to draw your whisker only to the last point that's not an outlier. Then your upper whisker is only going to be extended to the largest observation that is not an outlier. If you have an outlier, you're going to go beyond those whiskers and add dots. So if we're looking at the Big Mac data from before, there were a few values that were really small and really large. So we get our median 3.53, our lower quartile, which is going to be the average of 2.81 and 2.92, and our upper quartile 4.32 and 4.37. So here our smallest observation is 1.2, our lower quartile 2.865, median 4.345, upper quartile 4.345, and the largest observation 7.54. So we can go ahead and do the lower quartile, median, and upper quartile with the box and then the line there. But then we need to calculate that 1.5 IQR. So the IQR here is 4.345 minus 2.865, which is 1.480. We need to multiply that IQR value by 1.5 to give us that wiggle room that we're calculating. That gives us 2.220. At this point, you take the lower quartile and subtract that 1.5 IQR, and that gives you 0.645. Any number that's smaller than 0.645 would be considered an outlier. We don't have any data below 0.645, so there are no lower outliers. Now let's look at the upper quartile. You take the upper quartile and you add that 2.22, that gives you 6.56. That means any value above that would be considered an upper outlier. And we do have an observation above that at 7.54. So our lower whisker is going to go down to our lowest price like normal, but our upper whisker is only going to go to the highest value that was not an outlier. So we're going to see that it's only going to spread up to that 6.30 value point. Then we'll add a dot for 7.54 so that we know that that value was actually in the data set, but we don't want it to be distorting our view of what the rest of the distribution was doing.